taking a risk to, if you do something that's not right, because we all have had that, like as parents, as spouses, and being able to, especially as a parent, be able to look at that and be like, I wish I would have done this different. And not only do I wish I would have done this different, but I actually owe this person an apology. And being able to apologize to your kids, I think is huge. I think it's, totally. Because I think that they can see like, hey, number one, my mom and dad are trying, okay? So they're at least making an effort, right? And they realize they're going to make mistakes too. But I think it's really important to model apology to our children.
I'm Becky Brower, and I'm a Sendy mom. You're listening to the Sendy Mom Podcast. Today I get to talk to my very good friend, Amy Lucas. Amy is a mediator at Utah Dispute Resolutions. She finds a lot of satisfaction in helping people resolve conflict. I love talking to her about how she is able to get people to understand each other. She's great at listening and understanding people, including her own children. Amy loves Lake Powell and is an avid surfer girl. She organizes a book group and keeps up an incredible library of recommendations on Goodreads. Check her out at Amy Lucas. She has rated 675 books. Her Instagram handle is booknook75. She says she is risk averse, but I think she's just cautious physically. Although skiing behind a boat and riding a bike down any mountain trail and skiing down any mountain trail would seem risky to most women, when it comes to friendships and relationships, she is one of the most Sendy women I know. She continues to nurture relationships and has no fear of saying what is in her heart and mind, even if she doesn't agree with somebody. That makes Amy Lucas a Sendy mom. Enjoy my chat with her today. Well, welcome to the Sendy Mom Podcast. I am really excited to have Amy Lucas with me today. She's one of my very good friends. We've known each other for a while. She actually bought my house. That's true. 9 years ago or something, and moved into our neighborhood because I had moved down the street. And I am so glad that we sold our house to her so that we could become really good friends. We've done some really fun Sendy things together, and we're going to kind of talk about a few of those things and maybe get a little bit into our Lake Powell trips and things like that. We could kind of talk about that a little bit.
Well, and I've told you before, I listened to Miriam and to Marty's, and like, even though I love and know both of those women so well, like I really enjoyed like listening to your conversation with them too. So.
It's good to like pop into somebody's life, right, and understand them. So what do you think it means to be a Sendy mom?
Just being brave and maybe being willing to step outside of your comfort zone and do things that are fun and exciting and could be interesting to your kids and stuff too, and just teaching them how to be brave in the world that we live in, I guess. Yeah, we've got to take risks, and then we have to be resilient when things don't go exactly how we plan, and so we have to teach our children to be able to handle those kinds of things as well. So thank you. Yeah, that's great. So tell me a little bit about yourself, your growing up family, and the family that you live in now. Okay, so my family of origin, I'm the oldest of 6 kids. And I have 3 sisters and 2 brothers. I grew up in Colorado. We always had, my parents always made sure that we had all the things that we needed. I didn't feel like we grew up in lack at all, but we didn't have lots of extra things either, you know? And so some of the things that I feel like, you know, that my husband and I can provide for our kids now are things and opportunities that I wouldn't have had as a child, just because my parents were not in the same like kind of
socioeconomic
situation. But that never like affected me as a child. Like my parents were both, you know, super involved and very loving, and I felt like I always had all the things that I needed, even when there were some things that I would feel like, you know, might be hard to ask for this because I'm not sure if we have enough money for it. Like if I asked for it, then, and it was something that was possible, then I always got the things that
you never felt like you lacked.
Right.
Like you always had everything that you needed.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I had plenty of things, not just things that I needed, but I also had things I wanted to too, you know? So I didn't feel like, you know, like I was missing things.
Do you feel like you were encouraged to take risks or to experiment with things, or do you feel like it was more of guarded, that you felt like you had more boundaries?
I felt like I had more boundaries, but I'm not sure if that is something that came from my parents or just because of who I was and how I am, you know? Because like, I had other siblings who tried like different sports or were interested in different things like that. And I am not very, I'm a risk averse person.
Yeah.
So I'm not very I'm very cautious in my personality. And so I feel like if I had said, I want to try something, my parents would have encouraged me, but also my parents weren't saying like, hey, would you like to try this? And how would you think you would be interested in that? I don't remember like that being something that happened. And it could have been, but I just don't remember it, you know, because I was risk averse and I just probably was like, I don't
probably
know, that
just
seems
more
scary
cautious
or something. Okay. You know, if I'm being honest, those kind of things scared me because I didn't think I was very good at it, you know? And so, but also I never tried it either. So I wouldn't have known, but I just, there wasn't really I don't do any sports. I mean, except for like, you know, our church had like church basketball and church volleyball and stuff like that, and I would do those kind of things. But and my mom was a real good example of being physically active. Like she swam laps for my entire life. Like I mean, she would go like 3 times a week and swim laps, but I just never like.
Well, and you're certainly active.
Yeah, now I am for sure.
But that didn't happen until later in life then.
Yeah, not until much later actually. I didn't get into a good exercise program until after I had kids.
Okay, and why was that? Like what spurred that on for you?
Well, because I didn't like the way my body looked after I had children, and I didn't like what the scale said. But like in the beginning, I mean, I was in my mid-20s when I started having kids, and so like for me, it was like a means to an end. Like I did it until I like got back to the weight that I was before I had a baby, and then I was like, I'm done. And then like being blessed with good metabolism, I guess, was a blessing, but also a curse because I wasn't really motivated to do a whole bunch to take care of my body in that way. And so it wasn't until after I had my 3rd child that I was like, you know, hey, actually working out makes me feel good. It's not just to like lose weight or to be at a weight that I want, but I actually feel healthy. I feel like I, you know, sleep better and all of these things that like I probably knew intellectually, but just never had experience with like putting into practice.
It's really true. Like once you practice it, once you do it, you have that experience and you feel the difference. That's when you are converted, right?
Yeah, totally.
You have to do it for a little while, and then you're like, oh, actually this does make a difference in my life.
Yeah,
so
totally.
I'm just going to continue to do this.
Well, and also we weren't in a place where I could like, I mean, I had young children too.
Right.
You have a baby and then you have young children. And so it's not like I could be like going out to do all of this stuff adventuring when I had a child, you know? And so by the time I had my 3rd child, I was 30, and we lived in a place and had a situation where we had a membership to a gym that had childcare. So then it was like, oh, I actually really like this because it's a breakaway for my kids, but also I'm working out and I feel good and I feel like I'm a better mom too.
Sure.
And so then I was able to explore lots of different classes and find things that like, hey, I like this. And it was my first time like doing a spin class and realizing I liked that, or, you know, I enjoy step and those kind of things too.
Yeah, well, and then there's also the social aspect of it too, right? That you can go and be with people because I think I read this book about depression, like overcoming depression, and some of the biggest things are exercise and community, like being with people, right? And so that kind of helps to word that, you know, just help you to be more happy. Yeah. So that's great. You know, when you're trying to help your children to find a group of friends, do you look at the kinds of activities that you put them into to help them to find some people that will be inspiring to them?
I mean, I think that that's a good consideration. I wouldn't say that I necessarily have gone looking for specific environments. It's more like the things that have been there and that I feel like that they would maybe be interested in are things that I feel like do have good kids in them. So like mountain biking. So my middle child, Marnie, is a mountain biker, and she got the family kind of into mountain biking. But I have my second daughter, Brooke, is very, I would say, even more risk averse than I feel like I was in high school. And so like she will get on a bike, but that was not her thing, and it's like makes her nervous and stuff. I mean, she's better now, but like when we first started trying to do those kind of things as a family, it was definitely not in her comfort zone. But Marnie really liked it, and they had, we had friends. You had a son who was mountain biking, and we had other friends who had kids who were mountain biking, and I knew they were good kids, and she just really liked it. And then my twins are 4 years younger than her, and I just loved the social aspect, but also like I was motivated because of my lack of physical like experience and finding something I loved in high school to help my kids find something a little bit more, you know? I think sometimes you can have an experience growing up where you're like, I really like the way my parents did this, but I would like to do things different in this way that I feel like maybe could have been like, would have maybe helped me, or that I could help my kids, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
yeah, totally.
So do you feel like your growing up was in a safe environment, that you felt like you had room to explore and to try new things?
Yeah, I mean, I had room, but again, I wouldn't say that I felt like I was super encouraged to do stuff. But again, I was risk averse, and I was scared of things a lot more than I am now. I mean, like, it would be interesting to go back and meet your younger self, but like, I was afraid of like what people would say about me, or what people thought of me, or, losing friends, or, those kind of things that I was just kind of like, I'm good where I'm at too, And so it's totally possible that my parents saw that and knew that about me, and so didn't feel like pushing or making me try new things is going to be maybe something that I would be good for me. I don't feel like I took risks very good until later in my life, like even past college.
Well, let's go there then.
Okay.
Let's talk about like things that at time we talked about you starting to exercise, which is a big thing for a lot of young moms, who are feeling the way that weight that comes on, the physical weight, but also the mental weight that comes on with having a child, and then having to figure out how to navigate life with a child, and also being able to work out. But maybe there's some other times in your life where you felt like, you've been able to step out of your comfort zone maybe and do something that was hard.
Well, I mean, mountain biking for myself was outside of my comfort zone for sure. Also, I mean, because it's a little scary physically also, but also just because you're just kind of like, ooh, am I going to be bad at this? Like, that kind of a thing. I mean, I heard you say in one of the podcasts you already did about the fear of like failure, like the fear of failure and not being good at something. I feel like I got over that. I felt like in high school and college a lot, I was afraid to fail. I had a friend who was a really good example to me, and she would take like one class like every term that was something that she was just interested in, like she knew how to play the piano, but she didn't know how to take the organ or play the organ. So she took an organ class, and she bought the shoes and learned how to play the organ. And she was interested in doing learning how to make stained glass, and so she like took a stained glass art class and made some really beautiful things. But see, in my mind, I was too afraid of taking those kind of classes to fail, because I had a scholarship and I didn't want to fail a class, and so that made me really risk averse, and it's sad actually. Like, I mean, I really wish that I would have like had taken more things that I was just interested in. But I mean, I learned from that life experience. Even though I didn't do that, I encouraged my kids to do that.
Well, and on top of that, it's not too late.
Yeah,
right.
For sure. Yeah.
We're into our mid-adult years, I guess I'll say, and there's still plenty of things to do. So
yeah, totally.
So mountain biking is one thing that you've kind of picked up later, and are there other things
mediation, though. I mean,
yes, that's what I was going to ask you about. So, yeah, how did you get into that, and how are you enjoying it now?
Yeah, so I was always interested in it. I was interested in it in college, like when I was to the point where I was like, okay, what am I going to do with my degree? I looked into like some graduate programs in mediation, but I mean...
What was your degree in?
Family science.
Okay.
And I had a minor in business. So... but the way life happened, like I got married and, I worked in HR for a while, which I really loved. That was a lot of people interfacing with. And then when I got to the point where my children were all going to be in school, we had moved here and I started looking to it again and realized at the state of Utah, I had to have, in order to like do it through the courts, I had to have approved curriculum to be able to do the education piece and have that satisfied. And so I looked into a course at the U, and they had a graduate certificate in conflict resolution, and so that was going to qualify for it. They had a lot of other things that I could have done that were shorter hours, but this felt more like, a little more challenging, like would give me a lot more information. And so that was kind of the route that I chose to go. And yeah, I mean, so I'm a mediator for mostly family issues. So like divorce, child custody modifications, those kind of things. But actually like the skills that I learned in the conflict resolution program and practicing those communication skills and being able to like learn how to sit with people who are in conflict was a skill set that I didn't have, and that I'm actually really glad that I did, because I've been in situations with family members and just like in the community and other things where you can see things are spinning, and like being able to have somebody with the skill set to like, hey, let's like...
Well, and I feel like
and
I feel like you have a really good ability to zoom out and zoom in, and to be able to look at the big picture and say, okay, this is what we're really trying to accomplish with whatever this conflict is. And then also to be able to zoom in on the details and say, hey, we need to look at this person's emotions and this person's feelings, but we also need to be able to solve the problem for the whole group, and this is how we're going to do it.
I think a lot of times too, like people just appreciate like being able to feel heard, right?
Yes.
And that's a lot of what I think, I mean, that happens in a mediation, but also just like, in a family conflict or in something else where it is a skill set to be able to say like, hey, I can hear what you're saying, or I understand your perspective, and being able to say things like, tell me about this, or tell me about, how, giving people the opportunity to hear how they came to think the way they think, or what happened to them, and be able to express that. And so you can have understanding, right?
Yeah.
There's that, I have this like poster in my bathroom that says, listen to understand. And it is, listening takes practice, right? Because a lot of people will hear what somebody else is saying, and in their mind you're not really listening because they're figuring out what their response to that is going to be. And so if you listen to like really understand what the person is saying, then you have a different curiosity of the kind of questions and where you're going to go next, instead of feeling like I have to defend my position, or you know what I'm saying?
Sure,
it's a totally different conversation.
Yeah, because it becomes all about you.
Yeah.
And so if you can look at it as an intercourse between the two people, and how you're able to learn from each other.
Yeah, totally.
And I love the word curiosity, and you've done that with me before. You've actually brought out things from when we've talked before where I'm able to understand myself better, by saying, you sound very stressed. I'm like, am I stressed? I don't know. Maybe I am stressed, or this sounds like this is a big problem for you. And I love how you do that, so that it really helps to the person, whoever you're talking to really consider, like, maybe I am. This is how I'm coming off as this, in this way. And the other thing that you've done really well too is is to have some self-reflection. And I think that that's very important. You know, when we've had our little thing where I've been frustrated, and you can sense that, and then we talk about it, and you say, okay, that's really good information. And I want to try to be a little bit better at that. And that's been a really good lesson to me, that I'm trying to do that a lot more in my life as well. When somebody tells me something about myself, you know, that I think, I didn't realize I was coming off that way, I think to myself, okay, that's how that person is perceiving me. I'm going to try to improve that. I'm going to try to change that. And honestly, that's a Sendy thing to do.
It's risky.
It's
risky. Very risky.
Yes.
And so, that was something that didn't come naturally to me, because it's risky to venture out and say something like, hey, it seems like you're feeling like this, because you can either get the yes, I'm feeling like that, or no, you've named my emotion completely wrong and you've missed the mark, right? But both of those are good data points to have, right? You were either like, oh yeah, you are understanding, or actually you've totally misunderstood where I'm coming from. Yeah. And both of those are helpful feedback.
Absolutely.
In a relationship.
Yeah.
And but it is risky, and it's also risky to to be willing to have the conversation can be risky too. Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And because you don't always know how people are going to respond. And we as women, we often put thoughts into other people's minds, or we interpret things incorrectly of what people think. So we assume that, oh, well, she must think that I am just the biggest idiot, and well, that's okay because I don't care anyway, or whatever it is, rather than having the conversation and saying, I said this thing that was really dumb to you, and having the other person say, I don't even remember you saying that. Like that, it's a risk to bring something up that has been bothering us for so long, to bring that up, and then to have the other person acknowledge it. And because I've actually had that experience too, where I have come in the room with somebody and I've said, I'm really sorry I did this wrong, and had that person just attack me.
Yeah.
And so that's scary.
Risky. It is, and that is scary, because not everybody is going to be operating from the same interest of, sometimes people don't care about maintaining the relationship,
right?
And so that, could be a not concern for them. And so, it is risky, because if feeling like you could have a disagreement, or, about it, or not, I don't want to say fight, but you just have different perspectives about it. Uh-huh. Sometimes people can't.
And if you become rigid and you're not able to see the other person's point of view and change yourself, it comes down to pride. Right? And humility, being able to be humble enough to recognize where you've made a mistake, or even just humble enough to recognize that the other person has a valid, or not even a valid concern, but they are a valid person. Yeah. And they should be listened to. Whether they're right or wrong is not the point. It's the relationship, whether you want to keep that or not.
Yeah, totally.
Is it okay to sever a relationship?
I think so. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think I'm thinking in some of the mediations that I sit in, they need to be not around each other anymore. It's toxic for one or both of them. And so I feel like making a decision to not be in that relationship anymore is the right choice for a person to make, You also have to be able to have self-care for your own mental health too. Sure. And so if you have a person in your life who is, just it's toxic,
very toxic,
and you just can't get to a place, I think it's very healthy to have a boundary there. I think boundaries are super important, and the boundaries that we
tell me a little bit more about boundaries. For instance, if you have a parent or a child, somebody in your family that is a little toxic, but you have to be around them sometimes. How do you form those boundaries? What does that look like?
Well, I think it's going to be different for each situation, but I think if you've had the self-reflection to say, this person is toxic, whenever I'm around them, they're, we can't get in a place where we can have a conversation, like a deep conversation. I think that it's appropriate to say, I just have to have a superficial relationship with this person. And that can be sad because it's kind of like the death of something, right? Yeah. That especially if you had a relationship with somebody that you felt you were close to and that you could share things with and they were in your life, but then just recognizing the things that they do and the way that they create chaos in your life and they bring it into your life and you don't like that, then, it's appropriate to say, I actually choose to not be in that drama. Right. And it's okay to say, sometimes you have to cut the person completely out, but also sometimes you can just say, this is just going to be a superficial relationship. I can be around them. I can ask how they're doing, but I'm not going to let myself get sucked into, to the drama or the things that are, are that cause the conflict between the two of you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think we put so much value on certain relationships. Yeah. And that's where the problem comes, because when we do have to maybe downgrade the relationship to a more of a superficial relationship, then it becomes very difficult because we value that relationship so much. And so we have to change the way that we look at that relationship as well. So there's an old Jewish proverb that says if there's 10 people in a room, then you're going to have one of them that is going to be, one or two of them, maybe two or three, that'll be your very best friends and that you will get along with and you will understand each other and you'll be able to talk without any problems. There'll be 7 or 8 of them that you feel nothing towards, you're just very neutral and you can get along with them, but it's not like you're going to have a really deep relationship. And then there's one that is going to be critical about everything you do and is going to try to look for all the bad things in you. And for some reason, we just focus in on that one person and we forget about the 9 other people there that love us and think that we're wonderful.
Yeah, because it's hard to deal with rejection and it's hard when you feel like somebody doesn't like you. And so sometimes people are wanting to, stay in that relationship because they feel like maybe something will change eventually. But I think it's also just really healthy to say, we're never going to agree, and coming to the place where you're never going to agree. You're being negative is a place that you like to be in, and I don't want to be in that negative place. And being able to say I just don't want to be in the negativity and being able to remove yourself somewhat from that, I think can be helpful,
At least for a time, and that's very Sendy. You know, you need to it's very difficult to cut off some of those relationships. And so I think that you have to be very deliberate about it. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's forever either. There are other ways that, and honestly, it's you're in your own mind too, a lot of times. So if you can look at that person from a different perspective, that can help you to understand them better, and then also to forgive them for whatever happens to be the issue.
In any relationship, you're going to have 2 people who are coming from 2 totally different life experiences, right? Sure. And the way they view the world and is going to be informed on the things that they have experienced. And so it takes 2 people in a relationship, right? You have to have both want the relationship and be willing to
put effort into it.
And effort into it. And I think we've all had situations in relationships for whatever reason where it's maybe not even that you weren't willing to put the time in, but you just get distracted into other things and you only have so much time and you can only nurture so many close, good relationships.
But I want to nurture everyone, Amy.
I know. But I mean, when Facebook came into existence, it was like, oh, all these people that like I used to really love that was around, but I'm not around them anymore. And it's not just like, it's proximity sometimes.
And
too.
that's okay, because it's not like you forget about all those people. You take them with you everywhere you go. And, you know, we've lived in a lot of different places in the world, and I look at the friends that I've made in each of these different places, and I love them all, and they come in and out of my life, you know, sometimes, and I'm able to catch up with them and things like that. And things that they've said to me have made an impact on me. Mm-hmm. Like I will remember something that they have said, so I get to keep them with me where I go. But you're right, we don't have enough time to put that effort into all of the relationships that we have. And so when we're with a person, that's when we need to put the energy in. And I think that just being in the moment and understanding, you know, like just having some meditative understanding of, I am here now, and I am working on this relationship that I have with this person right now.
Yeah, totally. And that's good.
All right, it's time for our Sendy Spotlight. My husband told me that I probably needed to explain why I'm doing this. I thought it would be nice to have a little bit of a break during the interview so that you'd know we're about halfway through and we can kind of focus in on a Sendy woman from history. And so the Sendy mom I'm going to talk about today is Louisa May Alcott. I chose her because my friend Amy is a book lover and reminds me a little bit of Jo in Little Women. So I want to talk first about Louisa May Alcott's mother, Abigail May Alcott. She was an early feminist and she was an abolitionist as well. She raised her daughters to be independent thinkers and activists also. She often worked outside the home as a social worker to support the family when her husband's business ventures did not go very well. She was also the model for Marmee in Louisa's famous novel Little Women. Her resilience and forward-thinking views greatly influenced Louisa's strong-willed, ambitious characters in her book. So Louisa May Alcott had a sister, May, who was the inspiration for Amy March in Little Women, but she tragically died just weeks after giving birth to her only child, who she named Lulu after Louisa. And Louisa, who was 47 years old, took over full responsibility for that child. Can you imagine having an infant at 47? I know some of you probably do. I just don't think I'd have the energy. So the story she told her adopted daughter, she filled a book that she called Lulu's Library. Louisa May Alcott knew what it was like to handle home and family while pursuing her goals and a career, because in addition to caring for her niece, she was also responsible for her ailing parents until they passed away, and they were not well. She didn't ignore the emotions she felt, but she just rolled up her sleeves and got to work. I think we can all relate to that struggle. She said, "This double life is trying, and my head will work as well as my hands." How many of us have also felt that trying of our lives? But really we have two choices. We can worry about our lot in life, or we can make our head and our hands work for us and improve our lives through tiny, deliberate choices to accept what has been given to us and make it more. Louisa May Alcott said, "Work of head and hand is my salvation when disappointment or weariness burden and darken my soul." When things are disappointing or you feel tired, sometimes it's okay to take a nap. But sometimes, after a little bit, you just have to put your head and your hands to work and just get going. And that's what Sendy moms do. So when my sister was pregnant, this is Emily, when she was pregnant and was feeling really sick, she called me one night at like 10 o'clock and she complained to me about her house being a mess and dishes being in the sink. And she was just lying on the couch feeling pretty miserable. So I basically told her to get off her butt and go and wash the dishes. And I told her she needed to call me when she was done with the dishes. She was a little surprised at what I told her to do, but we still laugh about that. And every time she does the dishes, she thinks of me. Louisa May Alcott continues to be an inspiration to millions of Sendy moms all over the world. So when you're feeling down or a little bit disappointed, maybe think about something that you can do with your hands or with your head that will get you out of that funk, and just go out and send it.
I was just going to say back to what you were saying though about the having two people from different life experiences. Everybody has the agency of making the choice of what they want that relationship to, how much they're willing to invest and be in that relationship, right? And so it's risky sometimes because we all make choices where it's like, you might, maybe I'm not getting what I need out of this relationship and I kind of need to let it go. But it's not a failure. It's just like, you're just in different, you're in just a different spot. And if you don't both have a willingness to keep the relationship going, or maybe you have a willingness, but the other person is, toxic and it's hard and you just feel like you need to step back,
And that's hard when you've invested a lot into a relationship.
It's super
like,
hard.
have you ever noticed your kids getting, finding a friend, especially when you move to a new place and you don't know anything about the kids in the neighborhood, which is a blessing sometimes, but also it can be detrimental because they get hooked into maybe the toxic friend, and then having them try to get away from that toxicity. How do you help a child to find a new friend group or new friends?
That's really hard because when you're a parent of a toddler, it's super easy, right? Or even a young elementary school person, because you're the one in control of helping them get to and from places or socializing. But it is a lot more challenging when you have a teenager who is in those kind of situations. And I think that we can do this kind of reflective talking with them, and just like, I had some experiences where I could say to a child, okay, it seems like I'm just going to check in with you, but it seems like this is happening, and like does it make you, how do you feel about that when that's going on with this friend and this situation? And like, even just me being willing to like name what's happening and saying like, hey, this seems kind of off to me, or this is a little odd that this happened. And it gave that child an opportunity to say, oh yeah, actually I did notice that. And like, this is kind of different. And like, I think it's way better to help them process and get there themselves than it is to say something like, this friend's manipulative, this friend is doing this, because that's never going to be received well.
No, I've done that before, and it totally did not work.
Did not work.
Not at all.
But like, I think when you come about it in a different direction and you're able to say, hey, I noticed this, or did it seem odd to you about that, or how did this make you feel? Then they're the ones who are processing and coming to it themselves. And even though, like with this child in the situation that I'm thinking of, the child kind of got there eventually, like there were still lots of times where, things were happening and you're like, oh, I don't love this. But it is a learning experience. And if it's a learning experience that they're choosing, like you kind of just have to be on the sidelines and help them navigate that, right?
I think so, and I think that the key word is conversations.
Yeah,
having conversations with your kids is key.
Yeah,
and you have to come at it as a conversation and curiosity.
Curiosity for sure,
and not I am the parent, and lecturing, you know, if you come at it like I'm the parent and I see this happening and I see this happening and it's not going to happen and this is not right and this person is not treating you right, which I've done before, and it doesn't work. It's much better to have them like just say, and it's not manipulative to ask them to say, hey, I noticed this. It's more of a curiosity of like, I noticed this. How does this make you feel? And if they say, oh, actually, I really like it. Great.
Yeah. Okay.
But then even if it's a bad thing and they just say that they think they like it, it gets them thinking about it.
Yeah, totally.
Right?
Because you're asking questions. Yeah. And so then maybe even if it's not something they were thinking about before, then they might be able to recognize it. And maybe if it happens again, they'll be like, oh, this is kind of like when my mom was having this conversation with me, and that's interesting that it's happening again or something.
Yeah.
You know? And so it just puts them in a different
mindset so that they can start processing it themselves, because honestly what we're trying to do as parents is help them to become adults. And to become a good functioning adult, you need to be able to critically think through what is happening, the experiences you're having, and to make choices to do something different or to continue to do the same thing that you are doing to make your life better, right? And helping them to be able to see that themselves and to make those decisions themselves is really what we're trying to do as parents. Teaching your children to become adults is a deliberate thing that you do as a parent.
Yeah, and what I was going to say was taking a risk to, if you do something that's not right, like, because we all have had, that's not really taking risk. That's more like you've made a choice to act in a way that you're like, you're not, maybe wasn't your best self, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we all have had that, like as parents, as spouses, and being able to, especially as a parent, be able to look at that and be like, I wish I would have done this different. And not only do I wish I would have done this different, but I actually owe this person an apology. And being able to apologize to your kids, I think is huge. I think it's, totally. Because I think that they can see like, hey, number one, my mom and dad are trying, okay? So they're at least making an effort, right? And they realize they're going to make mistakes too. But I think it's really important to model apology to our children, because I think that, in fact, there's a really good book that I read not that long ago called On Apology that was so well done, and it just like, you know, the different kinds of apologies that can be offered, they talk about, but I mean, just being able to have a sincere saying like, hey, I did this, I feel really bad about it, I wish that I would have acted different, gives them the model of what that looks like. Because I have at least one person in my life who I feel like I have never heard them say, I'm sorry for anything, you know, like they just can't own that they made a mistake or that they made, you know, and so like, how do you think that if they never model that to their children, how are the children ever be able to say, hey, I made a mistake, and that's relationship healing,
Absolutely.
Right? You know, I mean, some people feel real averse to conflict. Like there's different levels of the way people want to deal with conflict, and one is a person who's very risk averse, and so they'll just to maintain what they see as stability, they will just like shovel everything under the carpet, and they will never like, they rather maintain what they see as you know, not conflict by just agreeing or not discussing hard things, right? Yes. And so I think that's really damaging to relationships.
Yeah, you have to have the hard conversations.
You have to be able to talk and have a hard conversation, and you have to be able to know how to do that and how to manage that. And also,
if you make a mistake, then you can go back and you can model that kind of behavior too. Model the behavior of having the hard conversation, but then going back and modeling the behavior of what you do once if you've said something.
Yeah, because we're all going to do that,
right?
And I've had plenty of opportunities to say to a child, I wish I would have handled that different. I'm so sorry if it made you feel like this. You know, I wasn't my best self, and I hope you can forgive me. And I, you know, and having the practice of being in that kind of a moment again, and remembering I didn't like the way I handled this, because that's really hard. Yeah. When you're amped up in your emotions and like your go-to is whatever it is, like yelling or, you know, stomping out of the room, whatever. Yeah, that's a good one. Stomping out of the room, or saying all the words that come into your mouth without a filter that you're going to regret later. Yeah. Like, it takes a certain level of practice to have a pause, and a pause can be so powerful. So powerful in a relationship. Mm-hmm. And actually even being able to have a longer than a few second pause and be able to say to a child, to a spouse, I need time to be able to regroup and come back to this conversation, and being able to say, this is an important enough conversation that I can't do it right now, but I'm going to come back to it, and I need to have a pause to be in a better place about it. Then I think that's also a really helpful thing to model to a child, or to a spouse.
Well, honestly, that's a really good tool for what we're talking about being Sendy too, because oftentimes when we think about being Sendy, we're like, okay, just go do it. But what I'm learning is that people who send it have done incremental steps to be able to get to where they are. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes you stop and you look at what's going to happen, and you take a calculated risk by calculating where you're going to go, what you're going to do, and how you're going to make it a successful attempt, whatever you're trying to attempt. And so I think that's really important.
So I had a situation, and I had a child who was going to have a surgery. And she, I made a choice that morning. She had, her surgery check-in time was 10 or 11 in the morning. So she stayed home, and I made a calculated decision to go get in some exercise for myself because I was going to have time to go to this class and come home. So she couldn't eat anything before the surgery. And, she knew that. The people who were at the house with her knew that. And I went to my class, and I walked in, and she had just realized that she was eating cereal, and we weren't going to be able to go to the surgery. And there was a lot of other things happening. It needed to be that day because if it was the next week, then I had a conflict. And I had people coming in from out of town. And so I just was oh my gosh, I flipped out. I just was I can't believe you did this. I berated her. I was totally not my best self. And I just felt so terrible afterwards, but I purged all my feelings onto this poor child. And she felt bad. Of course she felt bad. Nobody does it on purpose. She didn't intend to do it. And I made her cry, and it was just horrible. And I had to take a step back and just be this is not the most important thing. My relationship with this child is way more important than this surgery happens, or having to call the surgery center or the doctor and feel stupid and say, I have this 13-year-old, she ate, I feel really dumb, can it still happen? And no, it couldn't still happen. She had food in her stomach, and we had to reschedule. They were super understanding, and it wasn't the end of their world, and it wasn't the end of my world. But in the moment, I could not get out of my head about what a mess up this was and how upset I was about it. And so and this is really great too because it got caught on my Ring camera, and so you could see my freak out. So I was oh my gosh, okay, so that was awesome, and let's not do that again, right?
Yeah, but the important point is that you went back and you talked to her.
Yeah, and I felt so bad about it. I was listen, let's have some perspective. I'm upset, you're upset, you have whatever. Now I'm going to take you to school because you're not having your surgery today, and you're going to have to tell all your friends what happened and why you're at school, and we're going to have to rework everything out. But guess what? It was a mistake, and all of us are going to be able to get past it.
That's absolutely,
yeah. And that's what you want to model too, right? You want to say, don't get in a space where you can look at something and say, oh, even though I might be amped up in my head that this is so horrible, having that pause and stepping back and being this isn't the big thing that I'm making it into,
right,
I think is very helpful in life for them to also be able to say hey, when this thing that I think is world ending is happening to me, hopefully they'll remember okay, let's take a step back, and maybe this isn't the worst thing ever. It doesn't mean that it's not terrible in the moment, and you can have those emotions and whatever, but what you choose to do with it and how you interact with the people is kind of where your choice is, right?
Absolutely. When you recognize in yourself that, oh boy, I really made a mistake there and I need to make it right, then you need to have the hard conversation, which is hard for you, to apologize, because you have to get to that place of humility, that you recognize that you've done something wrong, and then go and tell somebody that you have, and you don't know how they're going to react.
No. And that's scary. That's risky, right?
Yeah.
Having that kind of conversation is risky.
Yeah.
And because they could either be oh, thank you for the apology, or, whatever, but they could also be I'm just not willing to take that. I don't want to hear your apology, and I don't want anything to do with you, you know? I mean, you have to be willing to accept both outcomes, right?
And part of how you can deal with that, if it's not received very well, is to remember that issue. It's not yours.
Yeah, that's true. And I really like that too, because I think that your end is realizing that there is a mistake and being able to offer the apology, and you've done all in your power in that relationship to try to mend that fence, right?
That's right.
And you have to realize that there is another person with agency on the other side, and they get to choose about accepting your apology or not accepting their apology. But that really shouldn't have any bearing on your decision to offer the apology, right? Because
that's your job.
That's your job.
That's your task.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And actually in this book on apology, they talk about that too, and that like whether or not, it's a kind of apology where somebody could, perhaps not accept your apology, and that's okay, but just being willing to offer it is...
That's your job.
Is your job.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Let's see. I wanted to ask, okay, is there anything that you are really wanting to do? Okay, we went for a nice mountain bike ride the other day, and you went on a trail that was hard for you.
It was.
And
because I crashed on it the first time. And so it was scary,
Yeah.
It's a trail that has a lot of berms, which I don't love, and it didn't feel safe,
Sure.
Yeah.
Imminent death, I think you said.
Imminent death, yes.
Something like that.
Yes, imminent death. Or at least possible death, right? I'm not even going to say the trail, because people from around here who might see that might feel like I'm being super dramatic. But here's a really good thing about that, though. So I had... we have a mutual friend who knew that I felt like that about this trail. And I was kind of like, okay, I don't want to do that trail again because I don't want to break my arm, because I have a really fun things that I want to do, that if I broke my arm or broke my leg, I'd be super sad if I couldn't go to Powell and surf or do the things that I really wanted to do. I like mountain biking, but I don't love mountain biking, right?
Yeah.
I love being on the boat and doing surfing. And so in my mind, I was just like, I'm not doing that because I do not want to put a trip at risk for not being able to do the thing that I really love, right?
Sure.
But our friend knew that I felt like that about this trail, and she had bugged me a little bit and said, okay, that's reasonable, but at the end of the season, when you're done with that, we're going to come back and do this trail. And I was kind of hoping she'd forget about it, honestly, right? And we had another friend who felt like this about a different trail, but in the same trail system. And so she sent a text to all of us and was like, okay, it's time for you and Chris to face your fears and do these two trails. And a little bit I was like, oh, I kind of was hoping she'd forget about it, right? But also I was like, no, this is good for me to face a fear and get back on the bike and go do something that seemed hard, just because I think that it's good for us to do hard things.
For sure.
I think it's healthy and good to try again, or to be like, okay, I can do this. And I did it. And I didn't crash. I had one part where I came around a berm and there was loose gravel and I had to put my hand out. And so I came off my bike. But I did the whole trail without crashing. And now in my mind, I can say, I can do that trail and I'm not going to be afraid of it, right?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and that's the thing is we try things and maybe I hate to say fail, but it's not even a fail. It's it doesn't turn out exactly the way that we wanted it to turn out, right? Yeah. And we have a choice at that point. And either choice is valid. You could say, you know what, I really don't need that in my life, and I'm just going to go and do something else. I'm going to try something else. But you also have the choice where you can say, that didn't work out the way that I wanted it to, and I really want to try it again because I think I can do a little bit better. And so the fact that you did this thing that was hard for you and that you got off the bike and you said, well, now I know I can do it.
Yeah.
That produces some good feelings.
Yeah, for sure.
And we have to have a few of those things in our lives to feel like we have meaning.
Yeah. Right. And I mean, you and I have talked about this before. There's a Freakanomics podcast that one of my very favorite episodes that I've listened to multiple times is about quitting things, and feeling because I think sometimes people feel like I'm a failure if I quit something, you know? Mm-hmm. And I really like kind of what they talk about in this podcast, that it's actually just kind of a a data point about saying like, hey, I tried this for sometimes a really long time, but like this isn't fulfilling me anymore, and it's okay to quit or say, I would say it's not a failure, but to just move on to something else and say like, actually I think that there's something that might be better out there. And that is very different than having like the mentality of feeling like I did this one thing for super long time. I feel like I'm totally invested in it and I can't quit and try something different. I think it's healthy to like think about that and feel like that's not failing. That's just saying, I think there might be something better. And it's okay to stop doing something and find something that you're better at or something that you enjoy more, because I think you're really good at that, about like trying new things and trying to do different things and figuring out like where your love is and what kind of things that you like doing. I think you've tried a lot of things and so you have a lot of data points of knowing like, I don't like this, but I like this. And it's not quitting something to say that, it's just saying I have a limited amount of time and this is what I want to spend my time on.
Absolutely. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, I better do these rapid fire questions for you. So what has brought you joy in the last 24 hours?
Let's see. Well, I had a situation with the child where we had to like come back to an understanding of things, and being able to come back and be like, I love you, like we can work through things and whatever. I think that was, it's always joyful when you're like, okay, you still love me, even though you don't love all the things that I do, but
it comes back to those conversations again.
Yeah.
That you've been able to have the hard conversations, and then you're able to apologize or whatever, or recognize that we still love each other even though we have these hard conversations.
Yeah,
so that's what builds those relationships. Those are going to become so strong when you can do that. So that does bring
and having
me
a
lot of
reconciliation brings joy anyways, right?
Absolutely.
But don't you feel like that? I feel like anytime I've had an opportunity to reconcile, you're like, oh, like the weight's off, we're back to like we're good with each other. That always feels good.
I love that.
Yeah.
What was the last TV show or documentary that you watched?
I don't watch a lot of TV, but I watched I think it was like 8 parts of We Were the Lucky Ones. It was a book that they turned into a mini-series on
I think I've heard of it
Hulu
before.
or something.
Okay.
But it was a World War II one about a Polish, Jewish-Polish family.
Okay.
And I think they had 5 children, and they ended up in all these different circumstances, like one ended up in a work camp in Russia, and one started the war in France, and they just like were in all these different places where all of them could have totally not made it through the war. Wow. I mean, they were Jews, they were all of these things, and every single child that lived through the war, including the parents.
So it was pretty good. It was a good one.
I mean, yeah, it was good, and it's based on a true story. It was real. They end up in Brazil.
In South America.
In South America. Okay. Yeah. But that was interesting because I'd read the book and I wanted to see what the adaptation was. So,
good.
Yeah.
All right. I don't have a whole lot of time to watch TV either, but I love getting recommendations because I do not want to waste my time.
Yeah, that's true.
On something, because I don't have very much time to.
If I don't know something that I'm going to turn the TV onto, I just don't turn it on. And so that's like, I just hardly ever. There's no reason to turn it on. I just can't even think of anything I want to watch. So.
Same. What was the last really good book that you read?
Well, I mean, the book club book for this month is Hester, and I just finished that one. I actually liked that one. I thought it was good.
Yeah, I thought it was well written.
It was well written. It was, an interesting historical fiction about Nathaniel Hawthorne, who wrote Scarlet Letter. And so I always like a historical fiction. I mean, obviously it's fiction, so it didn't, probably not real characters, but it just like puts you in the time frame. And I always love a good one that has a woman like
heroine
where you can experience what that time would have been like for her, because we just live in such a vastly different
yes, absolutely.
Time,
No, I loved that one too.
Yeah,
so
I thought it was good.
Looking forward to that one. Favorite vacation spot?
Powell. Hands down. I love it. Like, it's like my favorite place on the planet, you know?
It's so beautiful.
It's so beautiful. The weather's so warm, like all the good memories. And I love that it's not crowded, you know? I mean, there's so many vacation spots, or I bet my kids would probably say Disneyland is one of their favorite places to go or whatever. And that's its own kind of fun vacation, I guess. But I just love being in nature, and like the way we do it where we're out far on the houseboat is just like peaceful, and there's some people around, but it's not a lot, you know? I love that. It's just so...
It is nice. And
lovely.
And you can generally get away from the technology a little bit and actually relax. Just sit on the boat or wherever and just enjoy it. Get in the water when you get hot, and it's great.
And I love, and just even the nature aspect of it is just like, I just love being in a place that's just so beautiful and just like a part of our earth that you just think like, oh my gosh, like this is actually amazing. Like,
it is so
what
beautiful.
Was created for our enjoyment, you know?
Exactly.
I mean, it's amazing.
What's a place that you would like to go visit next? Is there a place?
Oh, so many, Becky. So many. Like, that's not the problem, but that's what happens when you start like going to places, is you're like, oh, I'd love to go here, or I'd love to go there.
Everywhere you live, there is some beauty in it. Name one thing that you try to do every day.
Maybe this is cheesy, but I try to, like, you know, have a connection with deity every day.
Love it.
Yeah.
Good.
I think that helps you be centered and just...
and for, you know, and people who don't believe in God, it's a time to come to a center to meditate. But I love that. Well, thank you for talking to me about being Sendy. You are a very Sendy mom.
Thanks.
I love it.
I think you are too.
We
good to learn from each other.
It is, right? and really it comes down to having this community with each other, people who are strengthening each other. And that's what this is all about. Yes. Thank you for listening to the Sendy Mom podcast, and be sure and subscribe and follow us on Instagram, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for being with us today. I'm Becky Brower, and I'd love for you to join our Sendy community at sendymom.com. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at sendy.mom, and on YouTube. Subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review. What's something you'd like to try, but it terrifies you? Take the first step and be a Sendy mom.